All right, let's talk about AI. You hear the term thrown around everywhere, right? But what does it actually mean? The definition seems to change so fast, it's just incredibly confusing to separate what's real from what's just, well, hype. So let's cut through all that noise. Together, we are going to build a new practical rule book for what AI really is right now.
And this quote, man, it just hits the nail on the head. This is the core of the problem. What we thought was a genius machine just a few years ago is now just a standard feature on our phones. The goalposts don't just shift, they basically sprint forward. And that's exactly why trying to define AI by its specific capabilities is, well, it's a losing game.
So, okay, how do you define something that just refuses to stand still? Well, the trick, it turns out, is to stop getting bogged down in how it works and instead focus on what it accomplishes. We're going to build a definition based not on some mysterious black box process, but on measurable, real-world performance. All right, so before we can write our new rulebook, we've got to, tear out a few pages from the old one. Let's take a quick look at why the classic definitions of AI are really failing us today. I mean, just think about this for a second. Decades ago, a machine that could just sort a list efficiently, something your computer does 1,000 times a day without you even thinking about it, was considered cutting-edge AI. What was once pure magic is now totally mundane. It's something called the AI effect. Basically, the moment a technology becomes common and actually works, we kind of stop calling it AI. It just becomes technology. Okay, so that brings us to the new rulebook. Let's just ditch the whole philosophical "can a machine think" question. Instead, let's ask a much more practical one. Can a machine outperform a human? See the shift? It's not about the process anymore, it's all about the performance. Okay, so here it is. This is our new working definition of AI. It's software that analyzes or generates data and, here's the key part, routinely outperforms an average human professional. Forget all the complex stuff under the hood. This is basically a performance review for software. Simple question. Does it do the job better than a trained professional? At the end of the day, that's all that really matters. And what's great is that this definition breaks down into 3 super clear performance tests. First, does it produce results that are just plain better? Or second, does it produce comparable results but way more efficiently? Or, and this is kind of the holy grail, does it do both? If a system can check at least one of these boxes, yep, we're talking about AI. All right, so we've got our tests, but I know what you're thinking. Better and more efficient can be pretty fuzzy terms, right? So let's get specific. How do we actually measure this stuff in the real world? We need some solid metrics. And this is where the definition gets really, really clever, especially when you're talking about subjective things like art or, business strategy. I mean, how do you put a number on better art? The answer is you don't. You let the pros decide. If professional artists or architects or marketers look at what the AI made and say, wow, yeah, that's high-quality work, then it passes the test. The proof isn't in some spreadsheet. It's in whether the people who live and breathe this stuff actually adopt it. So you can see we really have 2 different ways to prove quality. On one side, you've got the qualitative, subjective stuff. Is the music good? Is the design compelling? That's judged by users, by experts, by adoption. Then on the other side, you have the quantitative stuff. Did the model predict the weather correctly? That's proven with cold, hard, measurable data. And what's cool is that our rulebook has room for both. Okay, let's talk about that second test, efficiency. And look, we're not just talking about a gut feeling that something's faster. We need real proof. We're talking about a measurable, undeniable drop in 2 critical resources, time and, maybe even more importantly, energy. And this is where it gets, I think, really fascinating. When we measure the energy cost, we mean everything. We're not just looking at the electricity the computer is pulling from the wall. We're comparing that to the total energy a human uses to do the same task. And that includes the basic metabolic energy, the calories they're burning just to be alive and at their desk. It's a truly scientific apples-to-apples comparison of work. Okay, so we have our new rulebook, we know the tests. But so what? Why does any of this really matter? Well, it matters because this whole framework isn't just some academic exercise. It's a practical tool you can use to cut through all the marketing hype and figure out what's actually going on with AI. I just love this quote because it cuts right through the noise. We get so obsessed with the process, the machine learning, the neural networks, all that jargon. But this reminds us that all that learning stuff, it's just a sign of intelligence. The real test, the only thing that matters is whether the problem actually gets solved at the end. Now, of course, to make this definition really work, there's a little bit of fine print, a few key ground rules. For instance, a little bit of human help is okay. The AI can even make up its own mini tasks to get to the goal. But here's a big one. A system that's just stuck in a loop of learning and never actually produces a top-tier result, that's still considered in development. See? It all comes back to that simple bottom line. Does it solve the problem better or more efficiently?
So, what's the big takeaway here? It's this. This rulebook is a tool for you. The next time you see some new product claiming it has amazing AI, you can be the judge. You can ask the tough questions. Does this thing really produce better results than a professional? Is it measurably more efficient? This framework gives you the power to see past the buzzwords and spot the real deal.
And that really brings us full circle, doesn't it? We've defined AI not as some fixed object, but as this constantly moving frontier. It's always the line just beyond what we, as professionals, can currently do. But as that line keeps pushing forward, it leaves us with a pretty huge question to chew on. Where does that leave us? What are the skills we need to build when our current ones can be automated? That is definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.